Thank you everyone for being here tonight, Instagram Live, YouTube, and here on the Zoom. We're so happy to have you here. If you're new to Dr. Wallach, this man is a living legend, a veterinarian, a pathologist with over 20,000 autopsies under his belt, and a naturopathic physician who has done wonders for the health and longevity across the world. Thank you so much for being here tonight, Dr. Wallach. We always love having you here, and we can't wait to hear what you have to talk about tonight.
Thank you, Travis. Thank your team. I always appreciate being with you, getting the message out there. And of course, I don't know if you remember a year and a half ago when all this started, Dr. Anthony Fauci came out and said, we actually have film of him being interviewed on TV and news things. And he said that this COVID thing is a nothing. It'll be gone in a couple of weeks. Just wash your hands, wear a mask, and distance yourself. It'll be over with in a couple of weeks. Well, what did we get for listening to him for almost a year and a half? As of this morning, we have 32,061,286 infections, 577,109 dead. That doesn't sound like a nothing to me. Okay, that's in less than a year and a half. And in Arlington Cemetery, where we have our military dead from the Civil War up till now, okay, 100 years of wars, we only have 400,000 graves. Fauci beat that in a year, okay, and he still has a job. I'm just amazed. Well, it turns out that everybody's waiting for the vaccinations. That's the medical view of things. So you get a vaccination and it'll take care of everything. Well, there's three pieces to a vaccination. They never talk to you about the other two. They always talk about the vaccination. And as a result, people think that vaccinations kill viruses, bacteria, fungus, and yeast. Vaccines don't kill bugs. Vaccines alert your body and your immune system to the bad DNA and RNA in the bugs. So when the bug shows up, they say, there it is, there's the bad guy. And they send out the white blood cells and the T lymphocytes and the antibodies and the red blood cells and the platelets go kill and eat the viruses or the bacteria or the fungus or the yeast or whatever's attacking you. Well, this is problematic because the other two pieces have to be dealt with to be able to respond to the vaccination. And they never talk about, they never, ever talk about the other two pieces. Number one, you have to be able to absorb nutrition. The villi in your intestines make up, your intestines, when you open up an intestine during surgery or an autopsy, the intestines look like a shag rug. All these villi sticking up. Like 90% of the surface area of the intestine are these villi, okay? Well, when you eat gluten, wheat, brown rye oats, or drink it, beer, scotch, bourbon, rye whiskey, that kind of stuff, the gluten produces a substance called pro-inflammatory cytokines, which kill the villi. So from the moment you start eating gluten when you're a baby, and it gets worse every year, you're slowly losing those villi. And depending on how much gluten you eat and whether you're eating one meal a week or 3 meals a day, that depends on the speed at which your villi totally disappear. Now you only have 2% of your intestinal surface, and your intestines, instead of looking like a shag rug, they look like, a plastic tube. You don't have any absorptive surface. That's why a 3 to 5 year old baby, when they get the coronavirus infection, okay, the COVID-19, they will have common cold-like symptoms for 2 or 3 days, a little fever, maybe a cough. And then after that, it's over with. They got antibodies against it, and they're safe for life. Now, when a 12-year-old, 20-year-old, 30-year-old, 40-year-old, 50-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old has been eating gluten all their life, those villi are gone. You got this plastic tube, 2% absorptive surface. If you're not supplementing, you're doomed, okay? Because you can't get everything you need from your food. You must supplement. And when a doctor tells you, when you ask him, shouldn't I be supplementing, take some vitamins? Nah, just eat like everything you need. That doctor should be put in jail as a serial killer, mass murderer, because you cannot get everything you need from your food. Plants only need 3 minerals, give the farmer the maximum yields. And farmers get paid by tons and bushels per acre. They don't get paid by the nutritional value of the food. Okay, so you can call any fertilizer company on the phone and say, I'm planting some corn here in some sizable tracts of land. I'm going to plant some wheat. What's your best fertilizer? How many minerals do you have in your best fertilizer for corn and wheat? And they'll say 3, because that will give you the maximum tonnage in bushels. Where are you going to get the other 57 minerals? You need 60, okay? Well, we know that in the agricultural industry. That's why we don't need health insurance for animals, because we give them all the vitamins and minerals. Otherwise, the veterinarian would be living out there and you had to pay, you'd lose your farm to the veterinarian. Okay, so we learned if we just give vitamins, minerals to the animals, they don't get sick. It's just that simple. Well, let's just look at our status of this new bug. First of all, I have to say that this pandemic is nothing new. If you're a student of the Bible, or you've heard the Bible stories once or so, you understand that there's plagues that go back. That's how the good Lord got the Pharaoh to release the Hebrews who have been enslaved for 400 years in Egypt. He sent 8 plagues upon them, you know, 1 plague every year for 8 years. Okay, and when thousands died, then the Pharaoh said, oh, I better get rid of these Hebrews. And as Moses said, let his people go, kind of stuff, right? Well, when you look at it, this particular brand of plague we have now, this pandemic, which is just a new modern word for plague, it started at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, September 4th, 1882, on Pearl Street in New York City, in the bluff overlooking the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge, when Thomas Edison and Jonathan Leibs pulled the switch in the first commercial electric generating plant. And within 10 years, they had all these new diseases nobody had ever seen before, but it happened to be the darling moment for genetics. And so doctors are saying, well, these are genetic diseases. They've never seen them before. They're all just nutritional deficiencies, because all the minerals that used to be in the wood ashes and the wood stove and the fireplace and the fire pit we used to put in the garden, and grandma would put in her oatmeal, and she'd put them in her soup, and that sort of her goulash and whatever, her all kinds of soups. It was gone. And so people began to get these diseases, which were all mineral deficiency diseases. Now, doctors haven't changed. And they said people began to gain weight right around 1900. And they're 25, 50 pounds overweight, which is due to a nutritional deficiency, because people get a behavior called pica, P-I-C-A, pica, and they begin to want to eat everything. Frank, you just had a 5,000 calorie breakfast. What are you doing? You're eating another breakfast. I don't know. I'm still hungry. That's because they're deficient in that mineral. Well, about 1900, we began to have obese people. There was never obese people in America before 1900. If you wanted to see a fat lady, you had to go to a carnival and see the fat lady. And you pay $2 to see a fat lady that weighed 200 pounds. Okay, now I treat them. They weigh 300, 400, 500 pounds, okay, because they don't supplement. They eat gluten, so they can't get whatever nutrition might be in the food. And they're just hungry all the time. And kids, during the Second World War, when mama had to give up breastfeeding and go to the factory and make bullets and guns and tanks and things for the Second World War, they came up with baby foods like Infamil and Similac for the babies, but they only put 3 minerals in there. Now, for 25 years, I've tried to get the medical profession to put more minerals in the baby formulas, and they said, no, Wallach, they're poisonous. You can't put those minerals in there. So Dr. Milan and I went to China. We did 1,700 autopsies on kids under the age of 10 that died of what was called Keshawn Disease in Heilongjiang Province, Keshawn University, published in 3 languages. The English one is The Biology of Trace Element Research. Okay, it was published in 1990. We did the study in 1988. Okay, and of those 1,700 autopsies, 35% had cystic fibrosis, supposed to be the classic genetic disease transmitted to kids. 100% had muscular dystrophy, and 200 of them under the age of 1 year would have been diagnosed with sudden death syndrome here in the United States. But they were all deficient in one nutrient. So we got it published. We took it and we gave Jerry Lewis, Marvin Ropp, a great Navy SEAL I've been working with in the Amish countries, and because they have a high rate of muscular dystrophy, and we were curing them right, left, and center. So we gave 12 charts to Jerry Lewis. Okay, I don't know if you're old enough to remember the telethon. For 25, 30 years, whatever it was, he ran the telethon. He raised billions of dollars to find the cause and cure for muscular dystrophy. So make a long story short, in 2011, we gave him about a dozen of these charts of kids that Marvin Ropp and I had worked on, and the doctors had signed off that, yeah, they were born with muscular dystrophy. They don't have it anymore. The oldest one we treated and reversed was a 31-year-old guy. We gave those charts to Jerry Lewis. He was so excited. He took them after he confirmed it with the doctors. He took them to the Muscular Dystrophy Association, and they fired him before he turned around and walked out the door. That's whatever happened to Jerry Lewis in the telethon. Well, it all ended in 2011 because he brought them the cure, and they didn't want to find the cure. And so they tried the telethon, and they couldn't run it without Jerry Lewis, and that was the end of the Muscular Dystrophy Association. Well, it turns out that there are no genetically transmitted diseases, there are no genetically transmitted birth defects. And that's why my thesis on 20,000 autopsies is in the Smithsonian Institute's National Treasure. I'm very proud of that. And people can go to Siri and say, hey, Siri, and they put a hardcover on it, made it a textbook. Okay. It's called The Diseases of Exotic Animals, because I was doing autopsies in zoos and people who live near the zoos. We're looking for a canary in the mine. You know, the canaries, coal miners would take them down the mine. And if the gases would come to the mine, the canaries were more sensitive. They'd drop off the perch and die, and the coal miners would get out. Well, the whole purpose was to find a species of animals in the big zoos in the big cities who were sensitive to the same pollutants that humans were, because pollution was a big deal back then. And we would find one that died of the same pollution that people died from. And when they started dying in zoos, we could evacuate the cities. That was the whole reason of the project. That's why we got 25 million bucks. Well, to make a long story short, during that 10-year period, 1967, 1977, not one animal in the zoo died of pollution, not one person living around the zoo died of pollution. Well, we found that none of the birth defects are genetic, and they're all just simple nutritional deficiencies, and all of them can be prevented. Many of them can be reversed after the baby's born. You know, like cleft palate is preventable, but when they're born with it, it's a surgery case. You can't give them the vitamin and the mineral and make it go away. It's a surgical case. Stuff like cystic fibrosis, muscular dystrophy, we can reverse those, okay, even when they're born with them. Sudden death syndrome, and of course, I'll interrupt there. Let's see here, in 2013, April 16, 2013, we brought all that data, including those 1,700 autopsies, to a federal court and demanded that they put these nutrition things in the baby formulas. Well, they couldn't argue with 1,700 autopsies. So they moved and they decreed that they had to put these minerals into the baby formulas. Now you see about 17, 18 minerals in there instead of 3. Make a long story short, a year and a half later, September 13th, 2014, big headlines in the Charlotte Observer, big newspaper for Charlotte, North Carolina, kind of like New York Times for New York. They said, we don't know why, but sudden death syndrome has vanished in the state of North Carolina. Then 3 months later, and I called them and left them a message. They never contacted me. 3 months later, St. Louis Post-Dispatch and all the newspapers in Missouri came out and said, we don't know why, but sudden death syndrome has vanished in the state of Missouri. Then 3 months later, all the newspapers in the world came out and said, we don't know why, but the diagnoses of sudden death syndrome has dropped dramatically by 85 to 95%. And then about a month ago, the CDC, Center for Disease Control, came out and said, 15 years ago, one kid per 300 normal births would die of sudden death syndrome. That was 15 years ago. Today, it's 1 in 3,000. That's a huge improvement between 1 in 300 and 1 in 3,000. Well, that's because mothers are still giving them goat's milk and stuff like that, or they're breastfeeding the baby and they're not supplementing. And so those babies, is 1 out of 3,000, they're still dying of that nutritional deficiency. It's the same nutritional deficiency that causes sudden heart death in young athletes, about 500,000 a year in America alone. Okay, now, I want to say, we didn't get a complete picture yet. We don't get a complete picture till the end of the day, but things are spiking like crazy, okay? And you have to appreciate that the top 1, 2, 3, 4 out of the top 8 states in which the states all have more than 2 million, or excuse me, they have more than 1 million cases, okay? There's 1, 2, 3, 4 have 2 million plus. California is almost at 4 million, just short of 4 million. And Texas is 2.8 million, Florida is 2.1 million, and New York just got over 2 million, okay? They've been 1,900,000 forever. Now, today, the number of cases, new cases, is 69,444 as of 2 o'clock. Now, they're not going to shut that off until midnight tonight. And so this could be 80,000, 100,000 new infections today. Okay, this is also from the CDC. Right now, it's at 69,445 new cases just today. And again, I'm going to go to Florida, has 9,069 new cases today reported. Pennsylvania has 6,120. New York has 4,348. Michigan has 10,277, and New Jersey has 4,848. Now, there's dozens of states that have more than 1,000 to 3,000 new cases today. It'll be added to their totals, okay? And so this is an ongoing thing because they haven't dealt with the problem. Now, how are we gonna deal with the problem? Again, vaccinations don't kill the bugs. They just alert your body to the bad DNA and RNA. So I started making comparisons on Earth. What places had the most infections and deaths from the coronavirus, and what places had very few or none? Well, it turns out I got 50 different comparisons between states and countries that had, and countries that had wide variations in the number of cases and deaths, but they had the same population number. Let me give you a couple of time, excuse me, if I may. Let's start out with Florida and Taiwan. Both of them have 22 million people, and Florida has 34,000 dead. Taiwan has 10 dead, not 10,000, just 10. Florida has 3,118,713 infections. Taiwan has 1,000 infections, yet they have the same population. What's the difference? Florida, when you look at them by county, they have so many counties that have 40, 50, 60% Latinos, Blacks, Indigenous peoples, Native Americans, all of whom eat nothing but wheat, brown, and rye, and oats, okay? Whereas Taiwan is a classic Asian country, and they live on maize, corn, rice, sweet potatoes, beans, squash, and seaweed, which has all these trace minerals in it, which the bone marrow likes to be able to make antibodies and white blood cells. Let's look at a couple more. Let's look at Texas, and let's compare Texas with Vietnam. Vietnam has 97 million people. Texas has 29 million people, about a third of the population. You have a third of the population of Vietnam. Vietnam has 35 dead from the COVID. Texas has 50,000 dead. Vietnam, again with 97 million people, have 2,600 infections, and Texas has just short of 3 million infections. What's the difference? Well, again, Texas, like Florida, 40, 50, 60% of the people who live in certain counties are Latinos, Blacks, and Indigenous peoples, and their villi are dead because they're eating gluten. They don't supplement, whereas the Vietnamese, like the Taiwanese, they're classic Asians. They just live on maize, corn, rice, sweet potatoes, beans, squash, and algae, which is minerals from the ocean. One of my favorites is Nigeria and Brazil. This tells a big story. Both Nigeria and Brazil have about 208 million people. Nigeria is 98% Black tribal people, 90%. Brazil, same population, 208 million. Okay, they are 47% white Europeans that immigrated there a couple hundred years ago. They're 47% mulattoes, biracial, half Black, half white. And the rest of them are Black, about 9% Black. Now, the Nigerians have 2,000 dead. The Brazilians used to be number 2 behind us, but Mexico moved up to that. So Brazil is number 3 in the world of dead, 331,000. They have 12.9, almost 13 million infections. Nigeria has 2,000 dead and 163,000 infections. So it's 13 million more than 163,000. Yeah, is 331,000 dead more than 2,000 dead, of course. So what's the difference? Well, Nigerians live in West Africa and they eat like Asians. They live on maize, corn, rice, sweet potatoes, peas, squash, and seaweed. You know, the seaweed and algae from the ocean, that's where they get their trace minerals, which their bone marrow likes. Okay, then the Brazilians, they live on nothing but wheat, barley, rye, and oats, because all of the European countries that came to Brazil brought their wheat, barley, rye, and oats with them and planted it 200-300 years ago. And so that's all they've been eating for 200-300 years. They have no defense. And that's the difference, okay? 13 million versus 260,000. No, I take that back, 163,000. 331,000 dead versus 2,000 dead. It's their diet. And I got 50 other comparisons like that. And so it's always the Asian countries do well because they live on rice. They don't eat much wheat. Let's look at one more. The UK, which is England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, United Kingdom, UK, 67 million people. Let's look at Thailand. Okay, let's look at Thailand, which has 67 million people. Okay, and the UK has 127,000 dead from the COVID. Thailand has 95 dead. The UK has 4.3 million infections, and Thailand has 29,000. Okay, and it's the diet. It's just totally the diet. Anytime you compare an Asian country or the European country or European originating country, the best results are going to be with the Asians. It's that simple. So if everybody switches over and eats wild rice and sweet potatoes and beans and squash and seaweed, well, I live in Indiana. Where am I going to get seaweed? Well, that's why we have Fucoid C, we have Ocean's Gold, we have Z radical, we have all that kind of stuff with seaweed in it just for that purpose. And I think that, one other piece on the territory, and that is to maximize the benefit of the vaccinations, you have to get rid of all the bad foods, fried foods, processed meats, oils, and glutens, wheat, butter, oats, and sugar, and take your 90 essential nutrients appropriate for body weight. And I'd throw in the Z radical and the Ocean's Gold and Fucoid Z, that kind of stuff for the seaweed. And then if you don't get the vaccinations and you eat like an Asian and you supplement properly, the odds are you're going to be like the Asians, and you're not going to you're going to have a very low chance of getting the COVID. If you do get the COVID, the odds are you're not going to die. But just taking the vaccination and then eating gluten and not supplementing, you're going to die. You're going to have a very bad case of the COVID. So the vaccination alone won't save you without getting the nutrients to your bone marrow. That's the piece that Fauci left out. So this is all in the book, and the history is in the book, starting with 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, September 4th, when Thomas Edison in 1882, and Thomas Edison and Jonathan Leeds pulled the switch, and goes through the first 2 chapters in the book are about wood ashes and about all these people who did well by putting wood ashes into their food and into their gardens, and their carrots and beans and squash would suck up the minerals out of the wood ashes. They eat that food and they did well. But when they switched over to electricity, the doctor said, just eat well, you get everything you need. That would be like your mechanic, Travis, saying, don't waste your money on oil, for goodness sakes. You know, that's bad for the environment and all that kind of stuff. You want to stay away from the oil. No oil. But what I want you to do is just put dirt from Texas into your car. It's 6 quarts of dirt from Texas or Oklahoma. And there's bound to be some oil in that. Okay, now, an insane person would run away screaming and tell everybody what a crazy fool that mechanic is. When your doctor says, oh, just eat well, you get everything you need, people say, my doctor says, he went to Harvard, and he says, I can get everything I need by eating well. I'm just wasting my money doing vitamins and minerals. Well, you better start picking out your coffin now, Chuck. Okay, because your doctor is either lying to you because he's got kids in college and needs tuition money, or he's so ignorant, I wouldn't send a dead person to him for an examination. So with that, I think that's a pretty good summary. If you're going to vaccinate, that's fine, but you better be taking your vitamins and minerals, and you better be supplementing properly and get rid of the gluten so you can absorb it. And if you're not going to take a vaccination, you certainly had better be getting rid of all the bad foods and supplementing, and then you will do well. So I hope that helps you out.
That's awesome. Yeah, that was a great summation of kind of everything that's been going on lately. So thank you for that. I'm going to open it up for questions, but I do have a few that I want to steal before
Okay.
other people jump in. So kind of circling back, you mentioned already talking about baby formula, the missing mineral that was helping with SIDS, among other things. Now, if the mother of a nursing child is taking that nutrient in higher levels, is that just as sufficient?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Now, when I examined the sudden death syndrome thing, when we went to the federal court, you had to have all these statistics, right? And so what we found out was, in truth, 98% of the kids who were diagnosed with SIDS, sudden death syndrome, were in their crib. They weren't in bed with their mother when they died. So I forced them to change the name from sudden death syndrome to crib death. You've heard about crib death. Well, I'm the guy that made them change it to that. Okay. Then the other thing that I learned was the 2% that were in bed with their mother when they died weren't laid on by their mother, but they died of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy heart disease, which is the Keshawn Disease in Heilongjiang, China, where Dr. Milan and I did the 1,700 autopsies. So I'm one of the world's experts on that disease. And so I can look at it from 100 feet away and diagnose it, right? But it's one of those things where doctors had never seen a heart attack in a 3-month-old baby before, so they just never paid attention to it. They just said, well, the mother must have laid on the baby. But he was in the crib. The mother laid on the baby. Okay. That's how it happened. And people bought it for years. Okay, well, that's why they put that fiberglass sheath on the rail in the crib of the bed, because the babies used to chew on that rail on the crib when they're minerally deficient, because there's only 3 minerals in the baby formula. And so that's why they call it cribbing. Same with the horse, when they get minerally deficient, they chew on that top rail on the stall in the barn. And since their behavior looks exactly like the behavior of those babies in the crib, they call it cribbing also for the horses. Why do they call it cribbing? Well, that's because that's what babies did in the crib when they were minerally deficient. That's what horses do when they're minerally deficient. They chew on the top rail in the stall, so they call it cribbing. Why didn't they call it stalling?
That probably wouldn't go over too well if they called it a stalling. My next question is for someone that's suffering with high potassium. Is there any dietary, supplemental, or food things? I've heard that eating like kimchi can be good at lowering potassium. Is that true, or what do you know about that?
Well, usually when people have elevated potassium, that means that there's something going on in their liver, and their liver's releasing potassium because there's some piece missing somewhere in the body. Okay. And people can't select and eat potassium. You don't find supplements with, okay, here's one with 1,000 milligrams of potassium, and just take your potassium pill. No, it doesn't work that way. Usually when you get a multiple, there'll be a little potassium in there, but it's not like pathological amounts. So when you have an elevated blood potassium level, that means there's something else going on to make that happen. A door is closed someplace, so the potassium is building up in the blood because it can't get into where it belongs. So get off of gluten, number one. That's usually where the problem is. No wheat, bread, rye, and oats. Get them on the 90 essential nutrients. And of course, we have secret sauces for over 600 different diseases. Remember, my thesis for my 20,000 autopsies is in the Smithsonian Institute as a national treasure. It was 5,000 pages originally. They, W.B. Saunders bought the rights to it. Okay, and they made a textbook out of it. They edited it down without reducing any of the scientific value. They just used one word for 10 words. I'm only 20-something years old, so I didn't know all the words yet, right? So I used 10 words, and they could use one word to cover that territory. So they got it down to 1,200 pages. They put a hard cover on it, made it a textbook. They first published them in 1970s. Let's see here, I think it was 77, maybe was it 77 or 84? I don't remember, something like that, somewhere in there. And at any rate, they published it 90,000 copies. They sold them in like 30 days for $25,000 each. Okay, now what I want people to do is go to Siri when they leave here. That's I'd already done 20,000 autopsies before I did that one, right? That was a big $25 million project, looking for that animals in the zoo dying from pollution. That's why all that came about. At any rate, what I want to do is go ask Siri, is that book by Dr. Wallach, Diseases of Exotic Animals, EXOTIC, Diseases of Exotic Animals, that's all the zoo animals, available for sale. And they'll send you to Amazon, and they'll be maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 10, fairly cheap compared to 25,000. But there'll be other offerings. And you punch that other offerings, and there'll be like 6 or 8 or 10 different divisions based on the condition of the book. The dog is peed on it, and the dog-eared, and there's a lot of writing in the margins and stuff. You might be able to get that for a low price. And then if it's in pretty good condition, you get it double that price. If that's in pretty good condition, next one would double that, and you get pretty close to $25,000 if it's a library issue that's been in good condition in a library environment and so forth. And so it'll freak you out how much they sell those books for. They're about ready to publish another batch of them because they're almost all gone for sale. Because every library wants one or two or three or four or five. Every medical school wants them because of the pathology studies in there.
Wow, that's really, really cool. I didn't know that they were coming out with more, so that's really exciting.
Yes.
So I have one more question for you.
Yes.
I've found it interesting that we've talked a little bit about things that are kind of fads lately. So I'm interested to know what your thoughts are on cold therapy, such as cold showers, ice baths, that kind of thing. Do you know of any health benefits related to those things?
Well, they can sort of stimulate circulation a little bit. It's just kind of like a lazy man's exercise thing, cold shower kind of stuff. If you're just thinking about girls all the time, take a cold shower, that quiets you down kind of thing, right? That's infamous. But that's it. Otherwise, there's no therapeutic value in that. What you want to do is find out if you're absorbing things. That's very important. You get the book, Rare Earths and Cures, in chapter 9 and 10 tells you how to collect your hair, how to package it, where to ship it to. Don't forget to put the check in there because they won't run the test without the check. But it'll tell you if you're absorbing all of the essential nutrients. It'll tell you if you have toxic minerals, lead and mercury and stuff like that. It'll tell you if you have those kind of minerals in you also. And so you look at your hair analysis when you get it back in about 2 weeks. If all the bars representing each of the different nutritional minerals are below the bottom line, that means you're not absorbing. They're kind of all over the place and you're not supplementing, but they're all over the place because you're just eating well. Oh, these, I need to really supplement these. Well, if you really need to supplement, for instance, sometimes people call me and say, man, my calcium and my magnesium is off the roof. I mean, it's just above the top line on the chart. The doctor says, I can't even read the label on a calcium bottle, let alone take any. I got too much calcium. So no, you need to fire your doctor because your doctor is an idiot. What that means is you are so deficient in calcium, your parathyroid glands are pulling all the calcium out of your bones. And that's why your calcium is so high in your blood, which is why it's high in your hair analysis. You can't eat enough calcium to make your blood calcium go up that high. Okay. Well, that's where all my autopsies came in because I'm covering diet and all the other diseases plus hair analysis and stuff. For the $25 million, I was able to do hair analysis on all those 20,000 autopsies. And so this is something that doctors don't know much about. Also, it'll tell you if you have toxic metals in you. And of course, the book Rare Earths and Cures tells you what supplements to take to get rid of the toxic minerals. This is very easy. You don't need to go in for IV chelation for $300 an hour, and do that for 6 months to get rid of all that. It's very simple. You take supplements and exercise a little bit, sweat a little bit, and all the bad stuff goes away. And so, at any rate, this is the book Hell's Kitchen, the CD Hell's Kitchen, gives you the history in all these pandemics, tells you how to deal with them. The Red Warning Light CD that pharmacist Keith and I put together, Red Warning Lights, goes into, 8 or 9 different pre-existing conditions that say you're going to have a bad time with COVID if you get it, like obesity is a big one. 85% of the people who die of COVID are obese, which is caused by a mineral deficiency. Okay, because their bone marrow is dead, because their bone marrow required that mineral. As they're deficient in it, not only do you get obese, but your bone marrow is dead. That's why people go into doctors once a month for an iron shot and a B12 shot, because they tried taking iron pills and B12 pills and didn't work because their intestines are dead and they couldn't absorb the pills. So they had to go in for a shot. People get tired of that and say, well, I could give you every 2 months, I could give you a transfusion and give you red blood cells and platelets and white blood cells and stuff like that from somebody else. So let's try that. I was sick for 10 days after you gave me that transfusion. What else you got? Well, let's do a bone marrow transplant. It's only $100,000, but don't worry about it. Your insurance will pay for it. Surgery was a success. The operation was a success, and the patient died. Okay. All these are caused by eating gluten and not supplementing. So I hope that kind of gets people thinking in the right direction here. But it's all in that book and CD. It's all in the book Black Gene Lies and the CD Black Gene Lies. It's all in the book and the CD immortality goes into all the things that the long-lived people do. These people in their country, their average lifespan is 165. With us, it's 75. Emergency room surgeons, their average lifespan, according to CDC just a couple of months ago, was 57. They don't do very well. Why would you listen to them about health? Now, you get run over by a truck, you need to go to the emergency room. But, you know, obviously they don't know what to do to stay alive longer than 57. That's their on record, according to the CDC. And then my last one, I'll turn it back to you, is Johns Hopkins, very famous medical school and university in Baltimore, Maryland, very famous. One of the U.S. congressmen from Baltimore, Maryland, Elijah Cummings, this has got to be about 2 years ago now, he developed atrial fibrillation. And they convinced him it was a heart disease. And they said, we got to do an ablation. We got to anesthetize. You cut your chest open, put a hot soldering iron on your chest, on your heart, and to stop it from doing crazy things. And he agreed to it, and they killed him with the surgery, Elijah Cummings. It's not a hard thing. It's osteoporosis of the skull, squeezing the 10th cranial nerve, which controls the rate and rhythm of your heart. Osteoporosis of the skull, very common. And that's why we have the book called It's All in Your Head. There's 25 different diseases you get from osteoporosis of the skull, but a doctor never tells you that you have osteoporosis. Have you ever heard of that before I mentioned it, Travis?
Not before you brought it to our attention a couple months ago.
Yeah, but they always talk about osteoporosis in your leg bones and arm bones, your vertebrae and that kind of stuff, but they never talk about the skull, because that's how they send their kids to college with the tuition money, right? And that's because their tennis partner and their golf buddy, okay, a tennis partner and golf buddy has osteoporosis, or excuse me, treat people with osteoporosis of the skull. You know, they are neurologists, they are ear, nose, and throat doctors, they do hearing aid things, they're dentists, they deal with vision problems and blindness. I mean, I've had so many wagers with doctors. I've won so much money and free steak dinners and stuff like that from doctors, because I take their blind people and in 90 days to get them reading 20/20 without glasses. And they couldn't equivocate because they were the ones that picked the patients who were legally blind 6, 8, 10 years. So they couldn't argue with the diagnosis because they're the ones that diagnosed them as being blind 6, 8, 10, 12 years. And in just 90 days, I got them all. One doctor gave me 27. And in 90 days, they could all read 20/20. He didn't like me very much because he had to pay for the supplements for all as part of the wager for all the patients. So all that kind of stuff is in the book. It's all in your head. Every family needs to have that book, and they need to at least read, you know, 1 chapter a week and share it with everybody in the family, because every disease your doctor wants to milk your insurance. I mean, charge your insurance. Okay. And it's in your head. It's caused by osteoporosis of the skull, tinnitus, ringing in the ears, vertigo. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to open it up. I think I saw some
Okay.
questions come in on Instagram. Devin, if you want to unmute and jump in. I know I saw a couple come in on there. If you want to.
Okay.
Ask those.
I have a question. So where can we get this hair analysis done? I want to do that.
Okay.
That sounds pretty cool.
Okay. What you do is you go to www.drjwallach.com, www.drjwallach.com, get a hold of the book. You know, Travis may have one he can sell you. It's called Rare Earths Forbidden Cures. It tells you how to collect the hair, how to package it, where to ship it, how much to send in a check with it, and phone numbers and all that kind of stuff's in there, so you can call the lab and confirm everything. But we've been doing this for 20 years. And
What's the name of the test? What do they call that panel?
It's called a hair analysis.
Just a hair analysis and a test for
Yeah.
all kinds of minerals, basically.
Yeah,
So whether or not
nutritional
they're in your
minerals
system?
and nutritional minerals and toxic minerals.
Okay,
See,
gotcha.
for them to do a blood test on you, see, your body works real hard to keep your blood in optimal levels in all things. You could be seriously deficient and 50 of your 90 essential nutrients, but your blood test will show everything normal because your body's working overtime to keep your blood levels normal. You can be deficient and you have all these diseases which are caused by the deficiency, but yet your blood test is normal. And so that's why we do the hair analysis, because that's the only way you can get the truth. And, you know, there's people who are bald like bowling balls. They don't have a hair on their head. They can use pubic hair, axillary hair on your arm, chest hair. But you do have to tell them where the hair is from, because the results will be a little bit different based on the location of the hair. And you don't need much. You only need like a heaping tablespoon of hair.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Devin should be able to jump in now. Sorry about that, Doc, making you wait there.
Hey, Doc. So a couple of questions coming in online. One is, what are your thoughts on zeolite? It's a mineral, I think. What are your thoughts on zeolite? Your thoughts on pink salt, the benefits of pink salt, and also, is alkaline a myth? Alkalinity a myth?
Okay, well, let's start out with salt. Okay, we have a savor division and longevity. You know, we have let's see, I think we have 6,000 products now, and all our spices and salad dressings and stuff like that, and culinary stuff is in our savor division. It's called savor, like you savor the taste of this, or the flavor. And one of our great products in there is pink Himalayan salt. We have a pink Himalayan salt. It comes in a little canister, kind of like where you get chewing tobacco, that kind of size canister. And then we have the pink Himalayan salt with ground black pepper in it. I take the pink Himalayan salt on my poached eggs for breakfast, and my rice. I take 3 heaping scoops full of wild rice for breakfast, and I put my pink Himalayan salt on it. And then for dinner time, I'll have sweet potatoes and our rice, and I'll use the pink Himalayan salt with the black pepper ground up in it. There, okay. And so that's the salt thing. You require salt. Many diseases are caused by a salt deficiency, because you cannot digest food, you cannot break down proteins, you cannot absorb iron, you cannot absorb B12 without salt. You'll get bloating, belching, burping, and all kinds of bad stomach issues without salt, because the chloride part of salt, sodium chloride, the chloride part of salt helps you make hydrochloric acid, which is required to break down amino acids, proteins into amino acids. And also it keeps your stomach environment acid, where everything, all your digestion works, okay? You have chief cells in the walls of your stomach that actually convert salt into stomach acid, okay? That's why the chief cells are in there, to convert salt into stomach acid. And that keeps it acid, so the bacteria cannot grow in there. You're not eating salt because your doctor incorrectly told you, oh, don't take salt, it'll give you high blood pressure. That doctor should go to jail as being a mass murderer, okay? And they should, what happens is bacteria begin to grow in your stomach as soon as the pH begins to get neutral or alkaline, okay, above 7.1, 7.2, you're alkaline. You need to be at 2. Your stomach environment needs to be at 2 pH, okay? Acid. And so, but then you have to remember the doctors make their money by treating the symptoms. The only pharmaceutical that cures anything is antibiotics to kill bacteria. All other pharmaceuticals just treat symptoms. Doctors are in the business of managing the disease. They want to treat your rheumatoid arthritis for 40 years. They don't want to get rid of it in 40 days. I can get rid of your rheumatoid arthritis in 40 days. They want to treat it for 40 years. Okay. And then, so the alkaline thing, you do not want to be alkaline. That's some crazy hippie's idea of something good. They don't know what they're talking about. You do not want to be alkaline. You want your stomach environment to be acid. Your tissues will be kind of neutral, okay? And it varies from different organs and cells and things, but it'll be around neutral, give or take a little bit. And Zeolite, that's another company. And so basically, I would just tell you that I use that when I mix up concrete, but I don't eat it. I use our minerals, our blooming minerals, which are plant minerals. Zeolite, as the name implies, is made from ground up rocks. Anybody home?
Sorry, I wasn't sure if you had anything else. I didn't want to jump in and cut you off. I think that's super helpful. Would you mind just talking a little bit more on the alkaline? Do you think that drinking alkaline water is important, or should we just be focusing on purified? Or I know we have Icelandic water, but I'm not sure what the pH is on that.
Okay, Icelandic water is acid, and I drink 2 quarts a day. That's why I put my BTT 2.0 powder in. Okay, my Beyond Osteo FX, I put all that powder stuff like that in there, and I put my Cardio FX stick powder in there. I put those 3 things in there. I've been doing that for like 30 years. Okay, but have been putting in just somebody else's water, which is neutral, but ours is acid. And of course, Iceland is having all these volcanic eruptions. So our water is going to have more minerals in it now. Okay. Because of volcanic eruptions. And so, and I also like our Icelandic water as which I say is a gift to people when they come over. We give them a bottle of that and they say, boy, this is something else. Okay. And so they've never really consumed really good mineral water. Now you have to appreciate that you've heard of the blue zones where people live a long time. They have a high rate of 100-year-olds on these blue zones. There's 5 of them. They're all Polynesian islands, are Polynesian appendages off of islands where they've had volcanic eruptions. They have all these minerals from the volcano, okay, and they're eating algae and all this kind of stuff. And these are the peoples who have the highest rate of living a long time. Now, in the 20th century, the longest lived person was a woman by the name of Jean Calment from France. Okay, she died at 122, well documented. And then just, I don't know, a couple of months ago, there's a Catholic nun who just recovered from COVID at 116 years of age, and she came from the same town that Jean Calment came from, and she turned 117, and she's doing very well now, even though she had the COVID at 116, and she survived it because she's drinking all that mineral water there in this one town in France. And then there was a guy by the name of Dr. Lee Chen Yun. Okay. Do you ever hear of the book or the movie Lost Horizon? Yeah. Okay. No? Lost Horizon? Okay.
James Hilton.
Yeah. James Hilton. Very good. Yeah. Well, he spent a year tracking this Dr. Lee Chen Yun. Okay. And it was real. And so he wrote it up as a newspaper article for the New York Times and the London Times. There was such a good response, he came up with the book and the movie, 1933 and 1937, respectively. But this is where the longest lived people on Earth live, because it's all volcanic stuff and they don't have electricity. And so they're still using wood for fuel, and they're putting the wood ashes into their gardens. And it's not unusual. I have in my presentation on my computer, people, it's in the New York Times, it's in the Chicago newspapers, it's in this LA newspapers and so forth, the Miami Herald and so on. What happens is they show these guys are in a garden in shorts and a t-shirt kind of rolled up, okay, up to their belly so their belly can get some sun. So-and-so here, Abdul Shalamambi, is his birthday. He's 165 years old today, well documented. He's out working in the garden at 165. Well, that's because they're eating all these wood ashes with the volcanic minerals in the wood ash, because the trees suck up those minerals. Okay, and the Giltar Glacier in Hunza is where this place is called, Hunza Valley. And one valley in Hunza is called Shangri-La. And that was a place in the book, Lost Horizon, where people lived to be over 100. And everybody thought that was a mythical place. No, it's a real place. But it was so outrageously crazy that all the doctors said that's got to be a lie, it can't be true, but it's true. So there you go.
I love hearing that, man. Just the fact that we have the potential to live so long and live so healthy. I'm going to open it up. We got a few more minutes, about 10 more minutes.
Sure.
Kimberly's on here. Dylan, if Brooke has anything else.
I've got one more question. Yeah. This is my question. They say they put fluoride in the water for dental reasons. Any issues with that? Does it really cause people to become more docile and compliant with government wishes, et cetera?
Okay. You have to appreciate that fluorine is an essential nutrient. It's required for many things, including it's a cofactor to help put minerals into your bone matrix. Okay. And again, you have to appreciate that people like hippies, when they, want to, for one reason or another, say, oh, you can't put fluorine in the water. But they followed vitamin D3 they put into milk, because there were so many kids with rickets when they had the Industrial Revolution. and all the smoke blocking out the sun rays, and kids weren't getting enough sunlight, and they weren't eating liver and stuff like that, and so they weren't getting enough vitamin D, and everybody was getting rickets. Okay, and so they put vitamin D3 in the milk. They started putting nutrients into drinks. Okay, that's why they began to put nutrients into drinks. That's why we have a sports drink called Rebound that has 100 nutrients in it, 75 minerals in Rebound. Okay, I take people, for instance, and again, it's all kind of this government thing. And the hippies, that's how they get other hippies to do what they want, by telling them, oh, the government is going to kill you by putting fluorine in your drinking water, and blah, 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 blah. That's a science called crapola. Okay, get a hair analysis, see how much fluorine you have in your hair.
So I'm more worried about fluorine as a free radical in general. What's your take on that?
Well, let's see here. What should I say? But have you ever heard of olive oil?
Of course, yeah.
What do you think about olive oil?
Lots of free radical damage.
Yes, olive oil gives you 1,000,000 times more free radical damage than fluorine. The only time fluorine will kill you is you make a bullet out of the dry powder and shoot yourself with it.
Why is olive oil so rampant for free radical activity?
Because it has so many double bonds in there, it oxidizes and turns into trans fats, heterocyclamines, and acrylamides, and causes cancer. It also causes plaque in your arteries. Cholesterol does not cause plaque in your arteries. Cholesterol is an essential nutrient, makes up 75% of your brain weight and 95% of testosterone and 95% of estrogen. Cholesterol is one of your best friends. And so when you get statin drugs, there was no such thing as Alzheimer's disease prior to 1960. Now, there were dementias and little old people getting senile dementia. There's over a dozen different dementias and senile dementias, right? And loss of memory. But Alzheimer's as a specific entity did not exist until 1960, when they came out with statin drugs to lower your cholesterol, because they believed falsely that cholesterol was the cause of plaque in your arteries. Now, very few people have done more autopsies than me. Okay. And again, that's what my thesis is in the Smithsonian Institute's National Treasure. And again, I urge you to look them up. Ask Siri, are there any of my Dr. Wallach's book, Diseases of Exotic Animals, available for sale? And they'll give you what the lowest prices are, but then there'll be other options or other offerings, and hit that. And then it'll list books that are in better condition, new, and so on. And it'll blow your mind how much they charge for those books. It's been a textbook since, I think, 1984.
I'm gonna have to get one of those someday soon here. So
Start saving your pennies.
I have my change jar with my 5-gallon jug. So let's bring it home. I wanted to ask about cholesterol just in general. I know you just kind of spoke on it, but as being part of your team, and we know how important cholesterol is, but a lot of people don't. So do you mind just talking about the benefits and the uses of cholesterol across the whole body and why we need it so badly?
Well, again, it is the base that your glands make hormones from. Okay, people with ED, they're going to give you injections of testosterone, or give you testosterone pills and everything. But really, all you have to do is, eat eggs. I eat 3 eggs twice. I'm 82 years old. I don't have problems. Okay, I eat 3 eggs twice a day, soft boiled. And then again, they didn't have Alzheimer's disease until 1960. Now, doctors now, every dementia you can name, now they've changed the name to Alzheimer's disease. Why do they do that? Well, when you look at the payout for all these other dementias and senile dementia and so forth, it's a pittance compared to what they pay out to treat Alzheimer's disease. So any dementia you have, your doctor's going to name it Alzheimer's disease. Now, this is worth a 2-minute story here, if I may take the 2 minutes. Oh yeah, I've got plenty of time. So this goes back 20-something years ago. A gal calls me up and says, my brother, Ray McGregor, was diagnosed 11 years earlier with Alzheimer's disease. The doctors put him on pharmaceuticals for Alzheimer's disease. And at the 3-year mark, he goes into a coma. He's been in a coma in a nursing home for 8 years now, being fed insured through a G tube. Okay. You know, that liquid oil artificial food through a G tube 3 times a day. He's got 0 brain waves now, duh. And they want to pull the plug on him to get somebody in there who can probably live. They say he's not going to live, so they need to pull the plug. We'll get 90 days, I said. I want you to get our shake, our either our chocolate or strawberry shake, make it with heavy cream instead of water. I want him to have 3 of those a day through his G tube. You're going to have to do it because they're not going to do it at the nursing home. Then I want you to also give him our rebound. Okay. I want him to have a couple ounces of that in that shake. I also want him to have 3 poached eggs 3 times a day, blended up in the shake with a blender. Then I want him to have the de-stress capsules. There's 2 different types of dimensions that can result from deficiencies and stuff that's in there. So I want him to take 3 of those capsules 3 times a day, the ultimate niacin plus 1 of those 3 times a day. And then I also want him to have the ultimate daily classic tablets in case it's a vascular dementia, plugged arteries in the brain. You can take 3 of those in each meal. Okay. And then I want him to take some anti-inflammatory things. Okay. Like our Fucoid Z, which is our seaweed stuff. Okay. Or Fucoid Z, if you want to use the liquids, so you don't have to blend them up. You can just use our liquid Z radicals, the same thing as seaweed. Give him an ounce of the Z radical in each of his 3 meals, and call me every 2 weeks and let me know what the doctor says and so on. Well, she calls me in 3 days and she's screaming his name out and crying and wailing. And, oh God, he's died. They're going to blame me. Ray McGregor, she kept saying. Ray McGregor is her brother's name. I said, well, tell me about your brother Ray. How's he doing? Well, he woke up this morning. He didn't realize he was in a coma for 8 years. After just 3 days on my program, he wakes up, shaves, goes back to work as an officer in the bank. Now, the people at the bank there at that day weren't there 8 years earlier, and they think he's just a clever crook trying to claim he's a bank officer so he can rob the bank. So they call the cops. She says, the bank is swarming with cops because they called, nobody recognized him as a bank officer, which he was when he went into his coma 8 years earlier. And so that's my experience with Alzheimer's disease. I get rid of Alzheimer's disease by the thousands every year because it's either Alzheimer's disease or one of the other dementias, but they all go away because they're all nutritional deficiencies.
Just incredible that we can turn things around so quickly for people and really help impact so many lives. So I have you for 2 more minutes. I'm gonna ask you one more question.
Sure.
You always mention when we're talking about different protocols, you say the 12 bad foods, but you also always add sugar. Do you think that sugar should be added to the list and made it 13 bad foods?
Well, a teaspoon of honey a day is fine, but pure white sugar, okay, you require a lot of nutrition to deal with it when you're metabolically. You have to metabolize the sugar, put it into a shape you can use it for fuel and all that kind of stuff, or turn it into fat. It requires a lot of nutrition to do that. Whereas honey, you don't need so much nutrition to do it. We're designed to deal with honey. If you read the Bible or had somebody read it to you, remember, where was the perfect land? Where did people live the longest and the healthiest? The land flowing with milk and honey. Okay, that goes back to Bible days 2,000 years ago. So they were observing it without knowing all the biochemical details. They were just observing, hey, where there was milk and honey, people didn't have these problems. Okay, so that's what I use. If I'm going to put sugar in something, I just use honey. I never use sugar. I always use our pink Himalayan salt. I rebound our sports drink, healthy brain and heart pack, and of course we're the guys that got Evander Holyfield. He's gonna have a fight again here coming up pretty soon. He had a heart attack fighting Michael Moore, and he lost the fight because he had a heart attack. And we invented our healthy brain and heart pack for him. He was on it for 1.5 years. He came back and he beat Iron Mike Tyson, got his championship back. Who comes back from a near fatal heart attack and wins a heavyweight championship fight? Okay, healthy brain and heart pack.
Only people with the help of you, Dr. Wallach. Thank you so much for taking time tonight to talk with us. If you're on the call and you would like to stick around, we can do questions, we can chat after this. But thank you, Dr. Wallach. We'll give you a call soon and hopefully set up our next one. But
okay, thank you, Travis. Lieutenant Colonel Wallach, over and out. Thank you, sir.
Bye.